Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women in Construction Week. This is ASA, American Subcontractors Association, and we are having two different podcasts being presented to highlight Women in Construction Week, which is starting March 7th through the 13th of 2021. My name is Mike Oscar, and I serve as the Government Relations Director for the American Subcontractors Association. And I'm joined today by Sheila Ohrenberg, president of the Women Construction Owners and Executives. She's also president of the Sorella Group, and she's also a member of the American Subcontractors Association of Kansas City, who has been recognized as a Subcontractor of the Year, Associate Member of the Year, and along with Ethics in Construction. Sheila is being joined by Dana Thompson, the Washington representative for the Women in Construction Owners and Executives. So thank you, ladies, for joining us today, and I look forward to the conversation we're going to have regarding the questions that I'll be asking you. We hope to keep this as a free and open environment. There's no wrong answers, but look forward to your insights. So welcome, Sheila and Dana.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
No problem. Thank you. Let me just quick background. Women in Construction Week highlights women as a viable component of the construction industry, and it raises awareness of the opportunities available for women in the construction industry, along with emphasizing the expanding role of women in this industry. The first Women in Construction Week was announced in September of 1960 in Amarillo, Texas. So with that, I'll start with our first question. This question is going to be posed to both Sheila and Dana, but could you please identify for me a rose and a thorn about your experiences either working in or representing the construction industry? Why don't we start off with you, Sheila?
Okay. Yeah, I started working in the construction industry 25 years ago, and I would say the rose for me is it's a constant changing environment. You get to start one project, you get to see it from, the ground to completion, and you get to drive around and show your children all of these great projects that you've worked on. Something to be super proud of. I would say the thorn of that is, like I said, you work on construction projects from the ground up, and there's not necessarily always really great facilities. So you're working on a project without working water, without working restrooms, and that whole part of it. That is definitely has been the thorn for me.
I appreciate your honesty.
Something super simple that we all take for granted.
Nope, I appreciate your honesty on that one, and that is a matter that you have to contend with. So completely understood. Dana, how about you?
Well, of course, you have to remember that I'm speaking from the Capitol Hill lobbying perspective, and for me, the rose about working in the construction industry is that on Capitol Hill, construction really is pretty much of a bipartisan issue. We don't get the divisiveness that you get from some of the other issues on Capitol Hill. So construction industry issues can get support from Republicans and from Democrats. So to me, that's a real plus in trying to work on certain issues. The thorn, I would say, is that not very many on the Hill understand the industry and the procurement process. They don't understand really the low profit margin and how competitive the market really is. And they don't always understand the barriers that women face in the industry. And that's what makes it harder.
Understood. And I've witnessed that with you numerous times as we've gone up to the Hill and tried to talk with members of Congress. Their degree of separation of understanding the construction industry is pretty significant, and we try to break that down. But I do agree with you 100% that it is a bipartisan issue, especially when it comes to procurement, which 9 times out of 10 is a non-ideological issue. It's an issue dealing with the nuts and bolts of construction, which is important. But obviously, a lot of our members of Congress and their staff just don't have that awareness. They may have general awareness, but they may not have specific awareness of those issues. So, 100% agree. The next question, let me start off with Dana, since you just finished the first question. Is what do women love about working in the construction industry that you think? Dana.
I just like to remind people that I'm talking from my my experience in construction on Capitol Hill. And one of the things I do love is the challenge of explaining policy issues that people don't understand. And you have to kind of put those in bite-sized terms that people can understand. It's a complex, a construction project from start to finish is complex, but trying to put everything in bite-sized pieces so that the people you need to help you change policy can understand. And then there are a few people on Capitol Hill with a lot of expertise on construction. And so with them, what I really love is working with them to try to get the policy and the politics just right. And so that's what people love to see a little bit different than what I love. So.
Thank you, Dana. And Sheila, what do you love about women working in the construction industry?
I would say definitely the challenge. And like I said before, it is super challenging. No project is the same. You get to meet so many great people. Every project has different individuals and brings to a different expertise. Now there are still some projects that you work on and you very well could be the only female in the room, but I don't see as much bias as it used to be, and you can sit at the table and help solve those challenges. I think that's the best part about it.
Very good, thank you. We hear a lot about building a diverse and inclusive workforce. Women only comprise about 10.3% of the construction industry, and even smaller is the number of women on the front line. I'm told that it's only 1 out of every 100 employees are in the field. How can we expand that number, Sheila?
I think that we can expand that number by having conversations like this, making women and especially girls in high school even aware that it is even an option for a career. I know that when I was growing up in high school, working out in the field or even working in construction was kind of an idea. There wasn't that many, but it just getting the knowledge out there that it is a viable career, and that there's other women out there, and encourage
people to do it. Absolutely agreed. Absolutely
yeah.
Agreed. And there are several, I'm going to ask a follow-up to you, Sheila. There are several factors that explain the enormous gender gap in the construction industry, from, gender bias to lack of training to overall perceptions of women in construction. But despite all these barriers, and this is a true testament to all the women that work in the construction industry, and you not only working in the field, but also as a contractor, we continue to see growth, and there is a path forward for women in this industry. But of some of the barriers that I just identified, can you tell me one of them that's really resonated with you, that you think that there's, a wall or barrier we can tear down to allow for that growth? Which one would resonate with you, Sheila?
Again, I think it's just the perception, making everyone aware that it is 100% acceptable for women to work in construction, especially in the field, and just making it aware to everybody on, for employers to make sure that everybody on their teams are aware that, yes, we are hiring women and we do need to make room for them. So definitely perception.
Understood. Roger that. In 2021, new construction projects are expected.
Can I just work in for a second on that? Because
absolutely, Dana. Yes.
You asking that question about the barriers faced by women, and we've got women in the industry like Sheila who really, they do it all, and it's the old analogy of Ginger Rogers dancing with Fred Astaire. She did the same thing, dancing backwards and with high heels. But I don't think that everyone really understands how hard it is for women and how many barriers they do face. Because I think a lot of people say, hey, it is really tough running a small business for everyone. It's not just tough for women, and then on top of that, construction is a head-to-head bid industry, and it's very competitive. And yet women like Sheila in the industry face the small business issues They face the construction industry market issues, but at the same time, they spend their time trying to find the equalizers in the industry, trying to figure out how they can overcome some of those barriers like lack of capital, disrespect in the workplace. And I've known women on a construction site. They were tough women. They did a great job. These were big projects. And at the end of the day, they wanted to go into their construction trailer and cry at night just because it was so hard on them. Not the job, but the things they had to face on the site. But these women also, so they're doing all the things in small business, but at the same time, they're working against the barriers and they're mentoring other women to come into the industry at the same time. And it's pretty remarkable.
That's great. That's great. And again, it's a compliment to women in the workforce. Despite those barriers, they've been able to overcome them, and they continue to grow in the industry. And it's one of the reasons why we're celebrating Women in Construction Week. And it's one of the reasons why ASA is making a priority, not only with this podcast, but we have a second podcast dealing with women in construction law that is being presented with Bethany Beck, our attorney council chairwoman, to address some of these issues, to look at all aspects of how women are overcoming the barriers, expanding their input and work product into this industry and allowing for its growth. And with that, I'm going to direct this question to Sheila. Only 13% of construction firms currently right now are women-owned. Should we increase that percentage, Sheila?
Absolutely. You know, like you said, construction industry is growing, and there's no reason why women shouldn't own construction companies. There's no reason why women shouldn't own companies in general. I think one of the biggest challenges there are, you know, women have babies, and so when you have babies, that you know, halts you from, you know, being able to work 10-hour days to run a business. And so working around those, you know, working around some of those barriers as an owner, you know, will help with women owning construction companies.
Understood.
So
Go ahead, Dana.
I'm sorry. I was just going to, you know, add to what Sheila had to say. And I did notice that you say not very many women are on the front lines, women like Sheila and some of my other WCOE members. There's not a lot of them. But I wanted to talk about, like, when you talked about expanding, the thing came to mind, you know, one woman at a time. But I know that you know from, you and I both worked in the Senate, although at different times. But when I was there was not a single chief of staff or legislative director who was a woman. And so for our industry, I think we just need a lot more of exposure and education to women. And when we do that, we can really grow more women in the construction industry, just like it's grown on Capitol Hill.
Understood. I had my first impression working for Senator Arlen Specter was that I was recognized as staff for 2 years. I never had interaction with him. He did not know who my name was, but I mentioned that because it was Carrie Lackman, and God rest her soul, because she died of breast cancer many years ago. But she was my chief of staff. And they said the line in the Senate was, if you can work for her, working for Arlen Specter is a walk in the park, because she was one that controlled the access to them, and she ruled with an iron fist, but she was tremendous. She was a tremendous advocate. And then through that experience, I got to know the senator, continue to work for him for the next 8 years and beyond. And but if it was not for Carrie and her ability to tell me how to be a Senate staffer, I would not be in the position I am today. So 100% agree, 100%.
It's so funny that you mention that, because you may or may not know that Carrie Lackman also worked for Senator Hines of Pennsylvania, who I worked for. And we started out in the office doing scheduling. So the importance of being in the industry and gaining experience and gaining exposure and proving yourself is the great way to expand women in the industry. So that's funny.
There you go. We make connections every day. Sheila, back to you. Real quick question on this. To increase women recruitment and improve retention, what do you think are some of the most effective things we can do to that, to not only improve them, but also to ensure that we retain them, that we keep them? Any thoughts on that from an employer perspective and also from maybe an employee perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's twofold. For the field, what I mentioned earlier about running water and restrooms and things like that, I think that women, need a little more in the field when it comes to those types of services. And I also think that when it comes to lifting, I think that, women, typically aren't as strong as men. So I think that lifting is really one of the only barriers that they're going to have in the field, and working around that and working the workforce so that we can make some exceptions for them when it comes to lifting. And then in an office, same thing. I think with both the field and the office, I think, women are primarily the caregivers of children, not to keep going back to that, but I think that is one of the huge barriers. And, possibly having some job share, when your kids are sick, you typically stay home. And even if your husband, or the father stays home with them, you still have to share that. And I think that making some adjustments to schedules and making it okay. The current pandemic, I think, probably helps with that a lot, where, parents can stay home, but making adjustments for that, I think, would really help in both areas, for women working in both the field and in the office. I think that's probably the biggest thing I think employers can do. And definitely.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Sheila. I have just a couple more questions, and then we'll end this podcast. I want to go back to Dana for a minute. Schools and educational programs need to highlight the value of construction jobs for women and young girls so that they can see the industry as a viable career path. How can we advocate for schools and educational programs to recognize the value of women in construction? I want to go first to Dana, but I also would like to get Sheila's perspective on that as well. So Dana, please.
And Mike, again, thanks for that question. It's a really great question. And I think I have the perfect personal example that gets to the heart of what you're asking from two angles, really. So one of my daughters graduated from a military academy, and neither my husband nor I had any connection to the military. But for some strange reason, at the end of her freshman year, she came home and said she was going to join the junior ROTC program next year. She loved it. She was in it for all 3 years. And then she was accepted into the academy and spent 6 or 7 years in the military. So you're right that, number one, early exposure to the industry, the construction industry as well as the military, as an option for girls, early exposure in the system. But the other thing that is critical in that is, and like for my daughter, for example, was the school system's commitment to exposing students and girls to the military. So how do we work to get that in the school system, administrators thinking about that for construction, and especially for girls? And I know from experience, because my husband is a retired high school principal, but you have to educate principals and guidance counselors on construction and the opportunities for their students to have employment and career advancement. And that is the key. They have to see that as being a good path for students. And they have to understand it's not just one-dimensional field, and there are a lot of opportunities out there, and that they have the opportunity to work directly with tools if they want to. But there are fields like construction management, architects, computer-aided design, and then going through the ranks and, ultimately owning your own business. So women contractors, and I know Sheila and others are doing the right thing. They are showing up at the schools on career days or for STEM programs because there is science and engineers and constructions. But for high school and even younger, I think the schools need to have available to them a program from the industry that will pique the girls' interest with school workshops and summer programs, and not get the attention just of the kids, but also of the school administrators. So I think I've read so many about so many workshops and summer programs that are just for girls, and I think they work, and we just need to be a little more aggressive about that.
Understood. And I've worked with you, walked the halls of Congress, not only with you, but with your daughter, Erica, and I know I've seen it, I witnessed it firsthand. So, thank you for sharing that with us. Sheila, any thoughts to that question?
Absolutely. You know the old saying, if you don't have a seat at the table, carry your own chair. So dittoing exactly what Dana just said, you know, if we're not invited to the schools to tell them, you know, that girls have the option, it's us as leaders knocking on the door saying, hey, we want to get in there and we want to visit with some of your girls. And I will tell you, one of the ways that's very near and dear to my heart is the teenagers that are aging out of the foster care system. And, you know, working with some of those groups. And I know there are some all over the country, but getting in front of them, and especially, you know, as a female business owner in the construction industry, it is, you know, opening up the eyes for some of those girls that really, like we've talked about, had no idea that construction was even an option for them, and explaining to them, like we've said, you know, it is, you know, a way to, you know, a career that you can actually take care of yourself. And so, you know, knocking on those doors and showing up and letting them know, you know, and if you're a female business owner, doing exactly that, or recruiting some of the women that are already in the trades, and getting involved and getting in front of some of the other girls, I think is the only way that we're going to get it out there. And with podcasts like this, so much appreciated.
Thank you. My final question is, you know, again, coming back from the legislative perspective, Sheila, you serve on our National Legislative Government Affairs Committee. Dana and I both walk the halls of Congress, pushing our legislative agendas for our respective groups in the construction industry. But so that final question is, members of Congress, congressional staff have a limited understanding of the construction industry. How can we advocate for women construction owners? And I'll start off with you, either Dana or Sheila.
Dana, I'll let you take that.
Okay, I'll start off with that. But Sheila is certainly capable of adding to this because she is a great legislative advocate. But so I have one of the things that's really important that works for me, and that is, Mike, I've appreciated working with you just alone with ASA, but also with a couple of other construction industry coalitions, the Construction Industry Procurement Coalition, the Construction Employers of America, and we work together with the Congressional Construction Caucus. And these are great ways to really help people understand about construction. They're great avenues for getting members and staff educated on construction issues. And Mike, as you know, a lot of our job on the Hill is education. But I also have to work on the Hill when it comes to women's issues. And I talk to anyone who will listen. But for those issues, I really like to talk to women members and get them engaged. And then, of course, WCOE's best lobbyists are the women themselves, making the case and telling their own personal business experiences on some of the barriers that they face, but construction in general. So a lot of it is really getting people to get them educated, to understand, and then trying to get them to act.
100% agreed. Sheila, any further thoughts?
Yeah, I think the associations, I think, are your best bet. You know, when I started my company, I went to Washington, D.C. with WCOE, and I did not understand what lobbying meant, and I didn't understand the importance of it. And then, working along with WCOE and the other members, getting in front of the congressional folks and explaining what our issues were, all became so important, and it is so important. And I think if we want to talk to those congressmen and women, we go along with folks like yourself, Dana and Mike both, with an association and with the agenda, and helping them understand, I think is the best way that we can get in front of them and explain, what our issues are, and making them understand, I think is probably the best way, other than if you're meeting with on a regular basis your federal folks that are in your home state.
Yes, and I think we all witnessed this, and I think it was a direct response to the lobbying efforts that all these organizations completed over the years, especially during the pandemic, when construction was questionable if it would be considered essential. And I can recall early on in the pandemic that we, as an ASA community within the American Subcontractors Association community, worked very hard. It started on a Friday night through Saturday, letting 38 governors know that construction is essential. And because at that time, if we didn't continue these projects to move forward in a pandemic, in a safe environment, then our industry would have shut down. And there's no greater example of why lobbying and educating these members is so important. And we had over 1,400 ASA members reach out to their governors, and luckily in many of those 38 states, we were able to keep construction as essential. And people need to realize that there is a need and a great interest in advocacy with these members of Congress, or even state legislators or governors, because it is important. And Sheila, it is overwhelming. And right now, Washington is extremely overwhelming, not only due to the pandemic, but in the recent events that have occurred over the last couple of weeks. And the Capitol is closed, not only for the pandemic, but because of some of the recent security concerns. And I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail and those buildings will reopen and we'll have access to the people's house. But in the interim, as long as construction is declared essential and you can continue to keep working, then we can continue to increase the number of women in this industry to double the percentage from 10.3% to 20 to ultimately 30% and beyond. And that's the purpose of today's podcast. I want to thank you both for participating. Again, we had Sheila Ohrenberg as the president of Women in Construction Owners and Executives, who's also a member of the ASA community, along with a business owner in the construction industry. Thank you so very much for joining us. And we had Dana Thompson as the Washington representative, Women Construction Owners and Executives. This is a two-part podcast that will be airing during the week of Women in Construction, which is scheduled for March 7th through the 13th of 2021. I want to thank you both on behalf of the American Subcontractors Association for participating in today's podcast. And I wish you well with your continued pursuits to increase the number of women in this very important industry. And with that, I'll just offer, if you have any final comments, Sheila and Dave.
Yeah, actually, the only thing that I have to say is I'm super proud that WCOE and ASA are working together, one step closer to getting more women in the industry. And thank you.
Thank you. Dana?
And I would just like to say thank you to so much you and ASA for taking this week to highlight the contributions of women in the construction industry. So thank you so much.
Thank you.